Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit subscribe and like. Uh, Last night I got for the first time to be a guest on someone's live stream on the Legion of Myth channel. Feel free to go over there and look at that if you're one of the people here who are not part of his crew. It was interesting. I might do it again. We'll see. I might eventually at some point, now that I've established that my internet's not going to crash immediately, I might experiment with live streaming if I can figure out like what a good time slot would be or something that there's not already a ton of people already doing it, and that my audience would find ideal. So I don't know if you have any suggestions, like leave those in the comments below on that. But like a lot of different stuff came up. For the most part, everything was agreeable. Kind of like a couple responses to a few of the things that were brought up that I don't feel like I really got fleshed out. I was trying to be careful not to do too much of talking over people and trying to step back and let other people talk for a while and all that. And I found several times being like dragged back into the conversation, even though I was just perfectly happy just like listening to what other people are saying. Um, Probably like the most contention, the entire thing was the whole bit over whether or not it's right for game masters to have to remodify fifth edition D&D products back to the original cosmetic formatting it had in third and earlier editions. Yeah, on a level, no, we shouldn't have to do that, but we're put in a position where they are doing what they're doing, and we should remember that we are the ones in control, is basically my entire point. I say in the videos where I get into politics, I'll make reference to the fact that, like, on paper, I'm actually very liberal, and so it's kind of odd that I kind of have, like, the anti-democrat stance I have, and that I have some of the internet bedfellows that I have. A lot of that's actually kind of born from like a strong consumer advocacy kind of point of view, and especially with going back to Star Wars, with the Last Jedi, and the current stuff going on in D&D, and the stuff I see in comics, and a bunch of other things. Like I see a whole consumer group that's being attacked. For all intents and purposes. I mean, maybe not literally physically attacked, but that are constantly being bad-mouthed by the people who are selling them stuff, which is a very strange relationship entirely, and I don't like that. D&D was fine the way it is, or the way it was. Thing is, it's not even that I dislike D&D 5e, and I have no personal grudge against diversity and inclusion. I would rather see diversity of settings over diversity of characters within those settings, if you catch the distinction there. I think it would be more interesting to see more, settings that are actively based on East Asian or Middle Eastern or African type mythology, and that are divorced from, the classic Middle Ages of Europe style fantasy that dominates most of the fantasy RPG market. They don't need to be replaced. It should be in addition to, and I think that's kind of going even back to how the movies are. There's something about the way people think and frame things. It's not like it's just pure paranoia on the right, because there are people on the left who actively say stuff that makes it sounds like they are trying to replace the entertainment media. You've had enough like white characters. So you can just keep watching the old stuff if you want that, but all the new stuff's going to be diverse, as if that's going to somehow tip some sort of cosmic scale. With I don't know, really much consideration to what's going to happen when you have a generation of kids grow up who only see white people as villains and drug dealers and all that. Is that really going to balance things out? And much the same in D&D, it's all well and good to include minorities as minorities within fantasy settings, but I would like to see just other fantasy settings where other branches of the human race can be depicted as just being the regular humans of that area. There's still kind of a subtle Eurocentricness about the way diversity is being proposed and put out there by companies like Wizards of the Coast and Marvel and others that I find troublesome on a couple different levels. And so, despite a lifetime of arguing with Christians and, having been like a strong Obama supporter, like back in the early days up until 2012, basically, is kind of when I just kind of like, okay, well, so much for all the stuff we were told we would get when we, elected you in the primary to beat Hillary. The war movement, the anti-war movement, basically just kind of disappeared the day after Osama bin Laden was killed, and even the pittance of even having a public option in terms of universal health care was pretty much immediately thrown out the window. And some of us do actually remember past the daily talking points that were told by the news, and remember that the Obamacare thing that was like Bob Dole's insurance proposal back in 1996 when he was running against Clinton. That wasn't like the most like socialist liberal European style healthcare plan in the first place, and now I don't know. I guess that's all neither here nor there. As I say, it's just the consumer advocacy strain of me that is just bothered by how a lot of these media companies, and I would consider Wizards of the Coast and to be a form of media company in a way. It's entertainment media, and it's not necessarily all visual. But they're still selling you products to entertain you, and so I do think that qualifies as a form of media. And just this like. It just doesn't make sense. Your point is, as a company, is you want to get people to, you want young people especially, because they haven't, assigned their loyalties to one brand or another. So you have the most chance to rope them in and to do your thing and become loyal to you. I don't know how you encourage them to do that when your overall message ends up coming across as, hey, we got this great thing and our fans are horrible people. Wouldn't you like to come be one of them? That's basically been Star Wars' message for the last 4 years plus going on now, and that seems to be also what Wizards of the Coast is doing, and so yeah, it's like if you want to be using the 5e products, then it is incumbent on you as the person who's actually running the game. To decide how you're going to portray that. Are you just going to knuckle under and do what they're telling you, or are you going to do it your own way, or are you going to reset it back to the old way? I mean, you can. Those books are still around, and a lot of them still can be printed up. You can go get second edition AD&D brand new off DriveThruRPG if you're willing to wait a few weeks. If you can just put off that instant gratification twitch. You can have the classic D&D and with all the classic books that you remember and liked, and you could just run that. Even the OSR games, that they are also an option, but they're also kind of redundant because you can get the rules cyclopedia and run BX. You can run second edition AD&D. I don't know if they have first edition books available for print, but you can at least get the PDFs for those. Not to mention you can find originals on eBay and stuff like that if you're willing to, shell out a little extra bucks. But on the cheap, you can still get a copy of the Player's Handbook for $20 plus shipping, roughly, which is still cheaper than what a brand new copy of any of the 5th edition hardcovers are anyway. Without us, the company can't function. They have no product without game masters. They need us. They're dependent on us. We're the ones they actually dislike. They want a bunch of passive dipshit players to buy T-shirts, but they're stuck on the fact their product are books. Rule books that are really only appropriate for game masters have, and adventure modules that's really only appropriate for game masters to have. You can do stuff like White Wolf in the 90s where you have your individual thin little book just for people who want to play Tremere vampires, and it tells them all about Tremere vampires. But that you're not gonna get rich and support your kids and pay off your mortgage, with only selling thin little booklets. You need people to buy the big, juicy rule books, and players have no incentive to do that. and so they're stuck with us. They need us. Like the game doesn't run without us. We are the CPU. The game you can kind of look at as being like the CD-ROM when you buy a video game, but we, the game master, are the Xbox One. We are the PlayStation 5. We are the thing that is making it all real and active and running. So to the point that the younger DMs and younger, newer players are wed into having this expectation of a perfectly curated experience, as I put it, because of the way 5th edition has designed, their entire book line to be mostly adventure modules. And kind of like an adherence to rules as written kind of stuff. That's nothing new. I clearly remember rules lawyers being a thing all throughout the 90s. So I'm not sure if I really take that as all that valid of a counter argument. There's always been a problem with people who are trying to DM who are kind of sticks in the mud, so to say, when it comes to wanting to stick to exactly some canonical interpretation and presentation of what Forgotten Realms is in the book, kind of a thing. To some degree, I'm that way with riffs. I totally understand. I'm not like floating on high, hovering like some bodhisattva looking down on all ye little ants below me or anything. I'm just as down here in the dirt with the rest. I'm just trying to be honest about what the hell's going on around us. So we need to do a better job of teaching the younger kids that no, this is like creative expression, for you. If you're going to be DMing, it's not so that you can run Escape from Avernus or Princes of the Apocalypse exactly as it is in book. It's that you can take a couple things from those books and then put them in something entirely of your own design. In fact, jaded players will be much more kept on their toes if you're doing a sequelized version of a published adventure that draws a few elements from it, but has already, within terms of the world's narrative, all the events of that adventure have already been resolved, and so the characters are dealing with an unknown aftermath. That's the thing I frequently like to do when faced with players who've already read a lot of the material. You get to design the NPCs however you want them. That has always been the case. Them telling you in the book that a character is X race, X gender, X sexuality, X identity expression of any nature has always been optional. If you want Tiamat to be a dude, Tiamat can be a dude. You want to do a female Strahd, which I believe I saw someone that did some sort of OSR kind of thing, OGL book. That was like a female Strahd write-up, which, fine, who cares? You want to sexualize Strahd by giving Strahd breasts? Go for it. It's a free planet. You only got one life to live. Why not enjoy it with fictional vampiric breasts on your version of Strahd? This is all just stuff that's supposed to be in your toolkit. I do occasionally find myself having to stop and remind myself that some of the things that I am having to kind of, come to the defense of, because people attacking the idea that goblins are too stereotypical or any of that kind of stuff, I am actually, I've always been one of those kind of subversive DMs myself, going back to the 90s of liking to portray the take the elves and make the elves the bad guys and have the orcs be sympathetic. That's not itself also anything at all a new idea, but what I don't like is the game company trying to dictate to us that it's got to be their way or the highway, because they don't have that ability. It's just a bluff when they try to tell us we have to do anything and portray things anyway. All their tidbits about various kinds of it's all just a bluff. We don't have to listen to any of that. We are the ones who bought their product. We're the ones who are actually running the show. Unless they want to turn D&D back into something that's pretty much only a thing that you play at conventions so they can control it tournament style, there's nothing they can do to influence us. And that is not me advocating for people to go out there and do a bunch of whack stuff in their games. It's just me saying to just keep just a little bit of mental barrier between yourself and this company that's trying to manipulate you. And maybe it's just time to just get away from D&D. And that also includes getting away from the old versions of D&D and the OSR, because they're all still in this they're all still the same game. The only thing that makes D&D distinct from the OSR games is the presence of branded IP in terms of monsters and stuff. The thing that makes D&D distinctly D&D and not just a D20 game is the presence of beholders and owlbears and mind flayers and other things that they have trademarked. The fact that they allow people to just openly use the rules without giving them a license fee of any kind kind of is an indication that from the company's point of view, the rules are not the game. So what is D&D? I guess that turns into one of those existential, subjective kind of questions that only philosophers and ancient Greek dead men could possibly solve in terms of giving us an answer to that riddle. But once again, that's neither here nor there. Another thing I wanted to bring up that was talked about in the live stream last night that I kind of overheard and never really got a chance to go off into also is towards the end of when I was about to take off because I was starting to get headachy. Palladium is not a broken system. The Palladium rule system, by virtue of the fact that it's stayed intact as much as it has without 1,000 revisions and the company folding and then coming back under slightly new management or being bought by another company, Palladium is one of the oldest, longest standing role-playing game companies, and its rule system is amongst the most play-tested, like right up there, probably just maybe a smidge under the D20 overall concept, if you're ignoring specific editions of AD&D and Dungeons and Dragons, the D20 system. Palladium comes real close. People are intimidated by the range of options, not just in options of different kinds of characters in games like Rifts, but also yes, it's very skill dense. It does take some time to make choices. It does kind of power load your character up at the front, and they don't really gain much in the way of extra new abilities as they go along. They tend to just get better at their skills as they go along, and their hit points will tick up. There might be a little wiggle room about do you really want to have physical SDC in every last setting? Or is that really something that's mostly appropriate for Heroes Unlimited or After the Bomb or the Ninja Turtle games? Because those characters are supposed to be comic booky and able to take extra damage and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, in Beyond the Supernatural or Systems Failure, do you really want, is it really realistic to have SDC on a character on top of them having hit points? Do you want to have it so that, ranged weapon attacks automatically just hit points or critical damage just automatically go to hit points? That's all, a little bit debatable. It's going to take your player a while to make a character. Boo, frickin' who. They're going to feel really attached and intimately aware of that character after they're done. So, I know that's pretty bad that, your players are really invested in the welfare of their characters, but, I guess just somehow it's a cross we'll have to carry. Palladium is a daunting system that takes, as a DM, GM, whatever you're calling yourself, it's a system that is going to take a lot of work. Even if you're doing a streamlined, play from the hip kind of style of running those games, they still require homework. That, cannot be denied, but to say that the game system's broken, I just don't think people the combat should be avoided because it's complicated and dangerous. People need to you need to get it into your head that there's 3 different types of combat rules, and they don't do the same shit, and they don't use the same number of attacks or any of that kind of stuff. There's rules for fisticuffs and melee, and that's what most people tend to default to when running their Risk games. Then you have ranged weapons combat, which is much more dependent on the rate of fire and burst capacity of what kind of automatic weapon your character is using. And then also magic and psychic combat work a little bit differently in terms of the amount of attacks and how long it takes to manifest these effects that you're trying to generate with your mind or your magical skill and all that kind of stuff. Which, like, it's not streamlined, but it's realistic. I mean, obviously, the people who behind it, Kevin Symbieta and all his crew, they wouldn't openly acknowledge it, but you can't help but look at the context in which the Palladium rule system emerged originally, and how it reads compared to like the oldest versions of D&D. That a lot of how Palladium was designed was kind of responses to the nitpicky stuff people had to say about early editions of D&D, and it carries a lot of stuff over from it, and in some ways hit upon some of the dice mechanics that later editions of D&D ended up adopting before they got to it. They flipped the 20-sided die to, you always just want to have a high number, and you want to roll over their armor, not under. This chart you got to figure based on your character's class and level, and then subtract the AC of the thing you're attacking. I mean, it's the classic AC is not impossible to get your head around. People obviously played it and used it for years functionally and had great memories that they still carry to this day about those times. But it does add a lot of steps, whereas if you're just trying to roll a high number over a target number, that keeps things moving and it's easier to understand. Like, it has its own kind of like action economy of its own. The fact that if you're playing it harshly, if the characters want to be able to dodge certain kinds of attacks, yeah, you might have 5 attacks per melee, but do you want to use them all on your turn? Because what if you get shot at afterwards? If you've used up all your actions, unless you're one of the rare characters that's able to trigger having an automatic dodge reflex, you have to spend an action in order to perform a dodge. So, like, really, you should be always banking 1 or 2 of your actions back, just to hold back so you can still take a dodge after your turn is resolved. So your 5 attacks just becomes 3 attacks, and one of those attacks is to move to put yourself in a better position to then use, it has its own kind of budgeting thing. You do have to keep in mind that parry and roll with impact are also always there to reduce the amount of damage. Is it bad that player characters start off tough compared to like first level D&D characters, and that they're just fine-tuning their skill after that point, as opposed to like this exponential increase in ability and power? I prefer the Palladium system, obviously, just over time. 30 years of playing these things, like it always is the one I am drawn back to the most. D&D is easy, and it does have a lot of fun stuff in it. It's not like I hate D&D, but I don't find it quite as compelling as I find Palladium's games for a lot of different reasons. There's complaints about, I've heard over the years that the attribute system, Palladium's versions of ability scores, that they don't have as many bonuses. There's too great of a range where you don't get bonuses or negatives of some sort. And that the negatives, if you have a low attribute, if you're bringing those rules in from one of the Game Master guides, they're like way more debilitating than just getting like a -2 to your roll, like it is in D&D. Like having a low intelligence could like cripple your character's skills and stuff like that. Which, like, is that unrealistic? I mean, that's the thing, is Palladium's trying to create as much of a sense of gritty realism within this virtual, silly universe where Ninja Turtles are fighting robots from the future as possible. It's trying to create verisimilitude. Another one of those words nerds seem to like lately, thanks to Robert Meyer Burnett. All that extra weight and detail, like, it helps inform the experience the player has of the world. Even if they don't ever use it, knowing like what exactly their character's education background is, how good at they are just doing basic math. Are they literate? Are they stuck just having to make microwave food, or do they actually have a cooking skill? There's some of it seems redundant, but it's all sorts of little ways for a player to have a lot more flavor and make their character feel real. And so it's worth the time it takes to make Palladium characters. I think probably the core of most Palladium complaints ended up ultimately gravitating around Rifts, because Rifts has the most stuff going on in it. as I was saying in the chill stream last night, as a game master, like, no, it can't be a free for all where players get to have anything that's available in any Rifts books to play. That's going to be a lousy game. There's not going to be any reason for them to really feel like it's logical for them to be together. And the things you would have to contrive within that setting to justify that kind of extreme open-ended mixed admixture, like, you know, and why they'd be palling around together and have the same goals. Like, no, you pick a zone on Rift Earth that you want to, like, have your primary or the low level adventuring going on in, if you want to ultimately branch on into going to other places. Figure out, you know, like a good range of character options that are, you know, that go in line with the humans, and what kinds of DBs are actually endemic to that region, what are native to that region, what lives there. Don't bring in too much exotic stuff from foreign lands. That just complicates things. Rifts already has a lot of stuff going on, so it's already a bit of an uphill climb to establish a sense of what normality is in the Rift setting. Allowing someone to play a, you know, Cosmo Knight and your Rifts England adventure, like, that's just not you really shouldn't do that. And you, like, even down to the basic book stuff, like, think long and hard. Is it really going to be appropriate for the kinds of adventures that you want to run to have a dragon along in the player group? Give them a good chunk of option. You can still, you know, like, give them like anywhere from 30 to 50 class and race options altogether, and still, like, be ignoring, like, massive swaths of what Rifts has made available in the various supplements. You know, just curate that. Stick to your zone. You should be fine. You know, the dangerousness of the setting it should be used to intimidate people into trying to avoid getting into combat situations. The experience system doesn't need the constant combat. It's also one of the things that makes Palladium quote-unquote superior, because its experience system is designed to train players to be more thoughtful, involved players, because if they really want to get the big experience rewards, they got to be putting their character's life on the line to, you know, to try to save people and to actively be paying attention to what's going on and the story and plot that the DM is presenting to them, so that they can actually come up with interesting plans and schemes to try to get their way, you know, through this scenario. You gain next to nothing just for raw combat in and of itself, and it actively tells you to not give people XP if they're just having combat against weaker things just for the pure sake of combat in the hopes of gaining XP. There's no automatic XP just for going down the sewers and killing rats for hours on end, kind of a thing, like you can do in D&D. It's all designed, like I said, by rewarding the players, you're training the players how you want them to play. And Palladium's experience system is set up to, like, train, like, very involved, story-driven, invested players, which synergizes really well with the complex character creation system. The thing is what as a game master, your job is to, more than anything else, is to help your player characters level up. And so what you need to design in Rifts Adventures isn't like large encounters and chains of encounters where they get to fight this, and then they get to fight this, and then they get to fight this. You need to have something going on where there's some people in jeopardy, and they're under threat from some sort of enemy, and then the players have to figure out how to save them without getting themselves, you know, total party killed in the process. And give them, like, multiple avenues to kind of think up their own way. By having so many, like, non-combat related skills, like, it gives them, like, a ton of freedom to negotiate or set up, you know, booby traps. Like, there's tons of different, you know, ways players in a Palladium game can approach a problem that you can't find at D&D. And so, you know, the fact that, yeah, it takes longer to make characters, and that you do have to, like, you know, in your brain keep separate that, you know, ranged, you know, firearms combat does not operate the same as you know, sword and fist combat, does not operate the same as magic combat. Like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, I thought we were supposed to be the smart ones. Like, yes, it's complicated. If you want easy, go play the kids game. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, on that note, guess this has gone on long enough. Hit like and subscribe one more time. Just sign in to another account, make up a new account, and sign in. Go to Total Party Skills and hit subscribe again. Check out my stuff on DriveThruRPG and or Amazon.com. And as always, stay waspinated. Do it for yourself, if not for me.